This pine, based on the size of its shell bark, as we call it, and considering how long these take to grow up here in the north of Lapland, or Sapmi, probably at least around 300 years old. They can grow up to or they can live up to about 800 years or so up in these conditions, which is rather impressive considering I'm 24. So this fella is probably around, what, over 10 times my age. So nice. So here I am, walking up the low foothill of Kiilopää fell. That's it over there. That Kiilopää means shining head, which kind of means like the bald head of a fell. The definition of a fell being kind of like a low mountain whose peak is above the tree line. So you can see over there as well in the distance, the tree line gives way to a completely bald white peak. Now as I'm walking, or rather hiking up, I was thinking I wanted to make a video. I got my microphone here. I lost the pop filter for it. It fell from a cliff and I cannot find it anymore. So in case a gust turns up, it might be that the audio becomes completely unusable, in which case that would be a shame, but it is what it is. You take risks in life and you see if they pan out. And this is quite a small one in the scope of things. I just traveled about 18 hours up here from Helsinki, actually the train, the night train from Helsinki to Rovaniemi. That was around 12 hours ish. And then I had to take a bus from Rovaniemi up to Kiilopää, which was around, I think 4-ish hours. And there was a bit of a 2-hour wait. So it was about 18 hours precisely before I arrived at the cabin that I'm staying for a week. Me and some other skiers, some cross-country skiers, real outdoor fellas. There's a professor at Turku University. There's a woman who works at the European Commission on participatory, sort of participatory politics, I guess, like planning processes in a sort of pluralistic, participatory, vertical manner, and a couple other peeps. But this first day, we don't really have an itinerary. I mean, most of us aren't even here yet, so I thought that I would walk up the 470-ish meter tall fell. I don't think its prominence is actually that high, because I think most of this land is fairly above sea level already, so I'm not actually sure what its real prominence or the amount that I'm actually climbing is, but oh well. And why not share these views as best as I can hold this freaking selfie stick with all of you while maybe talking about some stuff. Now, I had a topic in mind for today, and that topic is spirituality in the secular age, and for largely secular people like myself. I think I sort of represent a common class of people, or a spiritual class of people, in the sense that I don't really subscribe to any institutional religion. I might go to church with the family every now and then, but I don't really consider myself Christian or religious in any sort of popular way. But I still have a lot of thoughts and interest in philosophy, in religion as a topic, especially the historical and cultural side of things. I like to examine my place in the world. I like to think about existential topics, about space, about life, about these sorts of fundamental questions that sort of show up in spiritual circles a lot, and that most would consider fairly spiritual in and of themselves. And I wanted to talk about sort of my experiences and the sort of ways, philosophies, ways of thinking, practices that I've experimented with, adopted, found help from as a largely secular, rational, empirical person in the sort of current world, current landscape of society and work and studies and all that sort of thing, and how, at least from my perspective, I think there's a lot of good things that we can still sort of adopt from spiritual traditions and even religious traditions without being religious ourselves. I think a lot of people have talked about this already, but hey, I think I'd like to throw my 2 cents into that discussion, so why not? We're starting the ascent. There's beautiful views back there. We'll get some amazing views up from top. Now the first question is, I'm trying to keep my microphone pointed the right way throughout this video. It might fail, I might fail, but failure is a part of life. I'm not trying to be like a smartass. That's just a fact. The sort of first question I think I would need to answer is, how do I define spirituality? And I think at its core, I would attribute my sort of the way I'm using spirituality in this discussion or video. I guess there's no one responding except if they want to leave a comment, which would be lovely. My definition for spirituality in this context would be connection to something beyond one's immediate circumstances and immediate sensory experiences, and a sort of intentional aim or desire to develop or otherwise just consider one's spirit in some way. Now, what is spirit? I'd like to think about it as one's sort of identity beyond, again, immediate surroundings, you know, your thoughts, your current time, your job, these things, you know, trying to cultivate or explore or study or otherwise just think about who you are, who the person is beyond the right here and the right now. And now that's a very vague thing, and I'd like to sort of explore the different ways in which this can manifest spiritually, religiously, or in a very sort of rational, empirical way as well. But still sort of argue that there's a lot of shared experiences and shared ways of thinking with all of these spheres. And I think the first thing to talk about would be how to find spirituality without religion. And I think the sort of immediate way, now this is a little counterintuitive, but the immediate thing is to look at your immediate surroundings, but not from a, oh, I'm walking up a fell, but from trying to think in a wider, trying to open your thinking a little wider. Now, I'm not talking about sort of occult woohoo. I'm talking about thinking about the sort of history of where you are. Time beyond your own time, you know, the past and the future. Think about life beyond yourself. Think about experiences beyond yourself. Really, it's about empathy towards not just other people, but towards your inner self, towards concepts, towards emotions. So for example, here on this fell, there's a lot of very empirically sort of reasonable things to connect this spirituality to. I could think about my place in the sort of sphere of life, this vast world of trees and fungi and the snow on the lichen right now, all the moss and all whatever is on the little taiga or low tundra underbrush. I don't know what kanerva is in English, so, and all the berries and stuff. You know, think about myself as a part of this grand sort of wonderful experiment of plant life and animals and fungi, and how wonderful it is to be able to witness all of that. That's one kind of connection, but it could also be social. You know, I could think about the culture, the history of this land. I could think about the Sapmi, you know, who've lived here for thousands of years, but also beyond. You know, the Sapmi weren't the first people to live around here. They were the sort of Proto-Indo-European cultures and languages that don't really exist anymore. We only have some few words here and there that are sort of, we don't know the origin of them, but we know that they are representative of a people or a few different peoples who lived here even before the Sapmi came. I don't think the Sapmi really, you know, waged war or anything. I think it's just that the Sapmi language was very popular and useful for trade, and cultures assimilated, and here we are. And now I'm also walking here. I could of course think about the colonial history of Finland, and that's one thing, but I like to also think about the sort of shared humanity of this. I think I'm fairly sustainable and respectful in my visit here, and that's enough for me. So I just think it's wonderful to be a part of this larger humanity, these thousands of years of history since the last ice age, you know. I think it was about 7,000 years ago that the first people came to live on these lands. And so there's at least two different ways that you can consider something beyond your immediate self and find, I believe, a kind of spiritual connection. Wow. Wowee. That's beautiful. And I think, you know, you could go all kinds of ways with this. Because both of those are very, like, they're not really matters of faith or religion, you know, they're matters of just what we know of the world. And you know, that's kind of what spirituality has been for basically everyone who's been spiritual. You know, spirituality they are part of cosmologies, you know, of how we understand the world, how we understand ourselves in them. And I think sort of understanding how you can keep spirituality as a part of your scientific sort of canon is very important. And I think because for most people, and also like the, you know, indigenous knowledges and all these sort of not Western ways of thinking, they're not, you know, a lot of people, they don't think that it's like separate from science. No, it's like, it's just part of the same continuum. And that's why with spirituality and spiritual practices and religions, you can kind of go beyond the empirical. You don't have to. And I think what I'm trying to convey here is that, like, even if you want to be a completely rational and empirical person, that doesn't mean that you don't have to, or that doesn't mean that you have to sort of categorically exclude spirituality from your life. And I think it can really, you know, keep you grounded to the world around you and keep you, or bring to you so much gratitude and wonder and awe just at the nature of how everything works and how beautiful it is. I mean, just think about space. Oh my God, black holes, neutron stars, quantum physics, what the hell? You know, we don't know jack about that. And it's all so incredible. You know, like the fundamental nature of universe is, you know, unmeasurable. It's uncertain. I'm hoping my sort of lapel here will keep the mic from getting too blasted with wind. Nonetheless, like, there's so many ways in which I think you can find a spiritual connection. Now again, like, you're connecting not just who you are right here, right now, in the sort of societal sense, but also like me as a human. me as a living being, me as a part of history, me as a little speck in space. These are all, I think these are all, or at least they can be, very spiritual ways of imagining yourself. And I think from there, it makes sense to talk about spiritual practice, you know? And here I think religious practices too can coincide or coexist with a non-religious, rational, secular, empirical, blah-de-blah-de-blah person and lifestyle, right? Because think about like meditation, yoga, especially yoga. I mean, these things have become quite secular around the Western world, especially, where obviously you're going to lose some or sometimes a lot of the nuance of the original religion behind it, but nonetheless, these are spiritual practices, especially meditation, which is, I think, emblematic of most of religion and spirituality, and especially the practices, not really being disconnected from human physiology and biology and psychology and all that, especially psychology. I kind of believe that most spiritual practice is really, in the sort of current sense, it's an effort to master the human psyche, the body, desires, thoughts, you know, emotions, these things. I think it's a sort of way of working on one's psychology, especially Buddhism, you know, and Hinduism and all that. I mean, obviously Christianity and sort of Abrahamic religions are a bit more tied to the mythos, you know, but like there's so much spiritual practice around the world that isn't really tied to, or doesn't at all require you to have faith, because it's connected to faith in a sense, but also like the actual practice is basically built on just human science and human psychology and self-discipline and all of these things. And that's why I think reading stuff like Tao Te Ching or like Buddha's teachings can bring a lot to even the most secular person, because they are very philosophical, you know? I mean, Hindu philosophy is, I mean, you read about Advaita Vedanta or something, and sure, there's like, it's like this panpsychist's dream book, but it's like, so much of it is connected to secular philosophy as well. How to live well, how to be empathetic. And I think what sort of has driven these schools of thought to develop is this spiritual connection, is this idea that you're a part of something bigger, something more beautiful than just yourself. And I mean, I just feel like everyone could use a bit of that. Not everyone. Everyone should at least consider it, I think. I'm not going to say that like if you don't want that, you're wrong. I don't think there's a right or wrong in this, but I do think that it can be very useful to have both these ways of thinking and also these exploring these practices of spirituality in a secular way. And I guess from there I'd like to kind of ramble on about sort of the meaning of spirituality and the ways in which that meaning can change and has changed over time. Because like thinking about religion historically, again, it's a way of understanding the world around you. And I think like Buddha, you know, like the original, you know, Siddhartha Gautama, or like, I don't know, Lao Tzu, I don't know how you pronounce that word, I'm sorry, or Jesus, I mean, Jesus. I think all these people, if they kind of just popped here right now, like, hi, dude, hi, there's this book of, you know, quantum physics or something, like this guy Albert Einstein, and like this woman Mary Curie, Sklodowska, close enough maybe. They like figured a lot of things out. I think a lot of these people will be like, oh my goodness, that's really interesting. I'm going to change the way I think about the world. And then all the religious sort of fundamentalists are like, what? You can't change the way you're thinking. But it's like, no, it's like these 2,000, 2,500 year old books and teachings are based on the worldviews, cosmologies, and science of the time. I think science is always the basis of spirituality. You know, what we know for sure is what paints our imagination. And so I think like we should be exploring new ways of spiritual well-being based on what we know about the world. I mean, shoot, again, like space. Up there, I don't even know what's out there. There could be aliens. Well, okay, maybe aliens goes a little far, because then you get like some weird stuff, weird new age stuff. But hey, I'm not here to judge. I don't really know about those things. Maybe if I learned about that, I would be like, Dad, that's actually awesome. You know? There's a lot of experience I have where, like, when I take an Andrew Callahan sort of approach of just like hearing someone out that might initially seem like they have some quite out there views of astral planes and energy fields and alien consciousnesses and these things, you might kind of have this knee-jerk reaction based on the scientific society that we grow in is, oh, this person is nuts. Then you talk to them, you might find out that, oh, they're just kind of having different words for different experiences of emotions and wonder at the world. And it's like, oh, astral projection is just like kind of meditation and imagination and kind of traveling within your own imagination as physical spaces in a very deep meditation state. And it's like, damn, that's reasonable, it's scientific. It's kind of awesome, you know? And it's like, you wouldn't get that if you sort of assumed that this spiritual language and spiritual way of feeling about it would be inherently at odds with a secular understanding of the world. And that's why I think, like, I mean, the whole sort of historical point of this is like most original religions, I think, kind of were secular in that sense. It's only when religions stopped growing along with the secular world, I just made the distinction, but that's where the distinction kind of starts to happen. I think it's there when, well, you get that distinction. I didn't say that very well, but I hope that makes sense. I'm not saying that all religions should just like swap to being, you know, completely, you know, 100% to fit our scientific understanding, because even our scientific understanding changes all the time. That's the whole point of science. I just wish people gave more of that energy to spirituality and religions as well. But I think if you just try to approach spirituality as a way of connecting with empirical reality on different levels, you know, exploring different forms of identity, different forms of connecting with your imagination, different forms of connecting with your fellow people. You know, what if we are all just one big consciousness? Or just, you know, that's a faith thing, but then you could also say, well, we're just part of one species, and even this one species is just part of one big old lineage of life as a single thing that started to replicate itself, and then it started to eat itself, and it started to become completely different things, but it's still kind of like one thing. And then you can be like, whoa, all of this, and all of that, and then literally every other galaxy and every other thing that exists used to be one little thing, and then went off. We all used to be in the same place. That's our empirical understanding of the world. And I mean, if you think about it like that, you'll start to go like, well, maybe I should be nice to other people. Maybe I should give other people the same worth that I give myself and my loved ones. You know, it's just, I think giving these ways of thinking that might seem a little cringe, they might seem a little hippie or whatever, giving them the empirical, rational credence that they deserve might surprise you with just how much joy and sort of strength they really give you, because once you start to really train your empathy and imagination and all this sort of stuff, well, hey, then the bad things that happen in life, the misunderstandings, the pain, the disappointments, well, maybe you can deal with that with more calm and more empathy towards everyone involved. Less hatred, less killing, you know? It's a bit of a large thought, but I'd like to think it's possible. Anyway, let's get a view from up top, huh? Holy! What a view. And what a wind. Hi, hi, hello, hi.